Welcome to today's briefing. We're diving straight into a fascinating piece of geopolitical analysis titled Twilight of Empire and the New Middle Eastern Order. Now, as a regional diplomat, I've seen firsthand how traditional power structures in the Middle East are being intensely tested right now. And according to the source material we're unpacking today, we are witnessing the groundwork for an entirely new indigenous strategic reality. Whether you study international relations or you're just trying to make sense of the daily headlines, this explainer is going to decode the shifting dynamics of regional power for you. All right, let's get our terms straight before we really get going. We'll be talking a lot about security architecture. Simply put, this is a framework of alliances, commitments, and agreements designed to keep a region stable, deter threats, and resolve disputes among sovereign states. Historically, in the Middle East, this architecture has been heavily underwritten by outside powers. But, and this is the crux of the text we're examining today, that old framework is actively crumbling, making way for something completely new. So here's our roadmap for this explainer. First, we'll look at testing the old order. Then we'll cover the limits of foreign power, followed by shifting strategic alliances. After that, we'll get into the real core of our analysis, designing future security architectures. And finally, we'll map out pathways to sovereign stability. Let's jump in. Section 1. Testing the old order. Specifically, we're looking at the resilience of the Iranian establishment. Our source uses the current conflict involving the US, Israel, and Iran as the main catalyst for this massive geopolitical shift. The author draws a really sharp contrast here. Look back at earlier interventions, places like Afghanistan or Iraq. In those cases, Western states could largely execute heavy bombing campaigns, leave the countries in ruins, and frequently achieve regime change. But today, the text notes a starkly different outcome. Despite immense physical and economic damage, the Iranian ruling establishment has proven to be, well, a tougher nut to crack, to use the source's words. The Islamic Republic simply hasn't fallen. So you might be wondering, what's actually driving this resilience? The text points directly to Iran's internal dynamics. Now, it absolutely acknowledges the severe toll, the immense damage to property, and the tragic loss of human life, including the targeted killings of top political leaders and generals. But here's where it gets interesting. The author highlights a crucial and perhaps unintended consequence of this foreign pressure. Despite some pretty significant internal fissures and domestic criticism of the rulers before the war, Iranian citizens have actually rallied around the flag. External aggression, according to this analysis, has generated internal cohesion, not the collapse that was arguably intended. Which brings us right to Section 2, the limits of foreign power, and an assessment of the American security umbrella. This actually illustrates the central geopolitical thesis of our source material perfectly. The text delivers a highly critical, really unvarnished assessment of Western intervention. Quoting the author directly here, "The war has illustrated the limits of American power and points to an empire in decline, struggling to exit a quagmire of their own making against a materially much weaker foe." Notice the framing there. The author is presenting militaristic adventurism not as some grand display of strength, but essentially as a strategic trap, one that yields very few actual benefits for the intervening powers. Now, from a diplomatic standpoint, this perceived decline forces a massive dilemma for the rest of the region. The text asks us to consider a pretty harsh reality facing many Arab states right now. What happens when a multi-billion-dollar American security umbrella flat out fails to protect them from a barrage of Iranian missiles? Think about that for a second. If the ultimate guarantor of regional security can no longer actually guarantee that security, well, the entire geopolitical equation has to be recalculated from scratch. To further complicate that calculus, the author makes a definitive and frankly stark claim about foreign priorities. The text argues that the US really only has one true, non-transactional security commitment in the Middle East, and that is Israel. According to this specific analysis, all other alliances in the region, no matter how historic or how well-funded they are viewed as purely transactional and ultimately expendable. That is a bitter truth that the author strongly suggests regional actors must wake up and face. Let's move on to Section 3, shifting strategic alliances and evaluating regional dependencies. Navigating this shifting landscape, the source issues some very explicit warnings about certain regional partnerships, and it doesn't hold back on the rhetoric. The text warns that giving Israel a foothold in the region is a surefire recipe for disaster. The author writes, quote, "The Zionist state thrives on the dictum of divide and rule and hopes to devour even more Muslim and Arab land." The position here is unequivocal. Reliance on this particular actor, they argue, will only create more regional chaos, certainly not stability. So what we are really looking at here is a profound paradigm shift. The text advocates for moving completely away from the old framework, a system characterized by dependence on foreign imperial protectors and highly transactional alliances. Instead, it argues for a new architecture. This new vision, it's mutually beneficial. It envisions sovereign regional states actually making their own decisions. It's a fundamental pivot away from outside dependency, straight toward indigenous self-determination. Now, of course, not all actors are moving at the exact same pace. The text notes that despite these changing tides, some Gulf states have made the strategic choice to double down and deepen their ties with the US and Israel. The author's assessment of the strategy? They are incredibly blunt. They call it betting on the wrong horse. The source is urgently calling for an end to depending on outsiders for security, which really sets up the need for a totally new diplomatic blueprint. That takes us straight into Section 4, designing future security architectures, and the core proposal for a sovereign regional framework. Let's unpack how this translates into a tangible diplomatic strategy. Referencing recent remarks by the Iranian ambassador to Pakistan, the text outlines exactly who needs to be sitting at the table. We're looking at key actors like Iran, the Gulf states, Turkey, and Pakistan. Together, these nations represent the wider Arab and Muslim fraternity, and the proposed diplomatic actions for them are very clear. Manage your own affairs independently, resolve internal disputes amicably amongst yourselves, and actively deepen your regional partnerships. This right here, this is essentially the architectural blueprint for the Middle East's new security framework. All of this analysis culminates in one incredibly decisive thesis statement from the text. The age of the foreign imperial protector is arguably over. Now, this isn't just a passing observation. The author presents this as a fundamental, structural reality of the modern Middle East. For our diplomatic analysis, what this means is that the era of automatically looking to Washington or London to solve regional crises is rapidly giving way to a new era of regional self-reliance. Finally, we reach Section 5, Pathways to Sovereign Stability and the Active Moves Toward Regional Cooperation. And you know, this transition isn't just a theoretical exercise. The source points to real-world diplomatic steps that are currently underway. It highlights active, effective channels. For instance, it specifically notes Pakistan playing an admirable role in trying to bring the US and Iran to the peace table. Even more critically, it points out that the Saudis and Iranians, historically fierce regional rivals, have managed to successfully maintain channels of communication throughout this entire current war. These are tangible, on-the-ground proofs that regional actors are in fact fully capable of managing tensions without foreign intervention. So, the key takeaway here is that the author provides a clear, actionable diplomatic roadmap for the future. Step 1. Sovereign states must actively reject their dependence on outside security. Step 2. They have to establish and doggedly maintain regional communication channels, even and especially during active conflicts. And Step 3. They must commit to amicably resolving internal disputes as a wider unified fraternity of nations. This process, the text urges, has to be pushed forward. We've explored the author's really stark assessment of declining foreign empires and this detailed blueprint for a sovereign Middle Eastern order. But as we wrap up this briefing, I want to leave you with one overarching, pretty provocative question. Can a historically fragmented region successfully construct a unified, mutually beneficial security architecture entirely without outside interference? The foundation is certainly being laid, but the ultimate success of this new order remains